I'm going to take a chance to say, yes, I don't think anyone's talking. Now you can let me know if you hear me, and then we know we're just waiting for our faculty senate president.
I hear you. Thank you, President Stokes.
I'm loath to break protocol for a faculty senate meeting. I feel sure something has held Finney up, and I know that I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I know that you would normally have some things that would happen before the president's report. Is there anyone who is vice chair?
It's Finney.
Finney's the president-elect as well, but we could, you know, if the faculty senate would like, we could suspend Robert's rules and move on to the report if you would like. That's the desire.
Christine DeLucas, so move.
Seconded, Brian Neese.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, let's do it then.
Okay, so I will assume, I know that president's report is down there and then followed by the provost's report, and you know, I probably will lose my capacity to share a screen or something. So who knows what might happen when yep, I just lost it, as a matter of fact. So let me see what I can do here. I heard from Finney. I'm supposed to. By any chance, can you see my screen?
I'm not seeing it.
You're not? Okay. Well, let me get out of here.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, Finney is here.
Oh, right.
Yay, Finney, we suspended Robert's rules for just a few minutes because President Stokes was going to do her report, but now that you're here, we can.
Go
No,
for
sorry
it.
about that.
Absolutely.
And he missed the rebellion.
I'm sorry. I'm assuming we have quorum. Colleagues will come to order at 3:10. The first item on our agenda is President Stokes' report. Sorry to keep you all waiting.
We haven't approved the agenda or anything like that yet, Finney.
Oh, you have not? Okay.
No.
All right, hold on.
Do you want Rick to put it up a screen for you?
Yes, please, Rick. Okay, colleagues, the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. The second item on our agenda is approval of the September 28th, 2021 meeting minutes. Are there any changes, corrections, discussion? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Colleagues, the third item on our agenda is President Stokes' report, University President's report. Again, I apologize for keeping you all waiting.
Can everyone see my slide?
Not yet.
No,
Okay, I apologize. I did not get set up like I normally would in advance of a meeting. I came in from another meeting, so I'm just going to have to talk through without the slides, and my apologies to you for not having everything set up. I did want to spend a couple of minutes. Finney had mentioned through the provost a desire to have me say a little bit about legislative priorities. And so I just wanted to share that there's a lot of work in progress related to the upcoming legislative session. Many of you are probably aware that Barbara Dameron is excited to go back to her research in nursing, and I'm grateful for all the work that she's done. Nathan Bush, who's been the Associate Government Relations Person, will serve in the interim role starting November 1st, and we have a team that will be working on this legislative session coming up. We don't have everything together in a neat place to share with all of you. We have a lot of research, RSPs, RPSPs, and the public service and research projects that come from a variety of places at the institution. But we have some capital projects such as that we are hoping to get through that will go to a GEO bond, some things on the health sciences side, some things related to the fine arts. And so we'll have a lot more detail about that in the not too distant future. Things are still going through the process. But I do want to tell you that a major focus for us in this particular legislative session is related to compensation for faculty and staff. We've been working with the Council of Presidents and working with the legislative finance staff. It's hard to say exactly where we're going to land, but we're going larger than normal with a hope of an ask of around 7% for compensation. We're also focused on increasing funding through ING, through the instruction in general funding, because that benefits our entire budget. And there are quite a few other types of initiatives. But I would say that, a big focus for us really is on compensation. And there have been some hearings, or at least one hearing, that was focused on compensation for faculty in particular. We have been talking at length with members of the legislature and members of the legislative staff about where we are to be competitive. And so there are at least some who are really interested in this issue. And so I'm hopeful that we might get some traction in this coming legislative session. We know there's a lot of one-time money. And so there are a number of projects that I think that will be discussed, and our government relations team will be working with faculty and with other leaders at the university as we get closer to this session. I wanted to bring up also our efforts with regard to our 2040 UNM planning. I think that I want to be sure first that you know that it's possible to provide feedback about this planning. I've made, I think, 2 presentations. The last couple of presentations to the Faculty Senate gave an update, but I think, you know, we've made more progress since the last presentation. We have formed task groups around the various goals that have been created. We also have a draft statement of aspiration and a draft purpose that we will be seeking the feedback from the entire campus about. The task groups and the steering committee will be working on those. We also have a couple of options for a mission statement. And this is when I'm regretting that I can't seem to get my computer set up to share. But we will get that information in front of you so that you can, and it'll all be posted at UNM, opportunity.unm.edu. We have some values under consideration. They include things like place, excellence, inclusion, integrity, and respect. And again, these are things we're seeking, you know, the feedback of the community about them. Place is defined, it just, you know, we're saying here that we're dedicated to the peoples and place of New Mexico and root our work in the varied communities of our state, even as we reach for what is truly national and global impact for the benefit of all humanity. We value service to others and value providing access to the talents of people. Then in terms of excellence, we value excellence in all of our work, and we strive to perform and achieve at the highest levels. Inclusion, we value the diversity of peoples, cultures, nations, and communities that are the heart of New Mexico and that present the richness of human societies around the globe. We respect and support the differences of all persons, and we value working in an environment where collaboration is valued and differences are cherished as critical to the success of all. Integrity, we define as valuing fairness, honesty, and transparency. We are good stewards of the resources that we've been given by the peoples of New Mexico and the world. And respect, we are mindful of the well-being of all the peoples with whom we engage, seeking to support their growth as humans, and we are thoughtful about the dynamics of power and privilege in our interactions. We've built 5 goals, and then we set those up as kind of pillars, and we have the foundations that underlie those to help us achieve those goals. Those goals include One University, which is our goal to create an environment of greater knowledge generation and innovation, connecting and integrating all of our distinctive academic, research, patient care, and service components. Our second goal is the student experience and educational innovation. And in this goal, you'll see where we talk about creating supportive and intellectually challenging learning environments. And we think about those both inside and outside of the classroom, that we're focused on the long-term lifelong learning. I think that's an imperative for universities of the future. And that we really are focused on the growth of people and contributing to the growth of human societies. Our third goal is, advancing New Mexico, which is really focused on leveraging the strengths that we have here and the opportunities and the challenges that are faced, which are sometimes unique to New Mexico, but actually they reflect national and global challenges as well. And a lot of this has a big research component. And I believe at our opportunity.unm website, you'll find objectives related to each of these goals. Inclusive excellence, we're talking about being a national model for how a research university like ours would engage our internal and external community stakeholders and value those voices. Goal 5 is related to sustainability broadly defined. An important component of that, of course, is sustainability in terms of environmental impact, and that we will have our decisions driven by an understanding of that environmental impact. But sustainability goes beyond that impact to include, the sustainability of people and a workforce, of revenue, and understanding the impact of that on just the sustainability of the institution and its mission. So there are many components to that. And then finally, the foundations associated with how we would support these goals. Now, I want to say that we have task groups working on each of these areas. What I would hope is that, what I would plan is that this group would have an opportunity to weigh in. You can, again, do that with a feedback through the feedback mechanism, but our task groups will continue their work through into November, and then we'll continue this work with the community with a goal of trying to have things completed with objectives and tactics in the next 2 to 5 years. And a whole lot of people working on this. I think we have more than 90 people working on the task groups. It's a lot of faculty and staff, some outside constituents, some students, but there's a lot more voices that are needed for this to be fully successful. And so again, we'll be looking for your feedback. I will postpone talking about, I've been sharing with you the president's goals given to me by the Board of Regents. But you've seen a good part of them, and I'll share the rest of them with you at some point when I manage to have the technology working for me rather than against me. So with that, Finney, I don't know if you'd like to turn this over to the provost or how you'd like to take it, but I will stop here.
Oh, boy.
You're in twice, Penny.
You're muted in one.
All right.
That works.
Okay. Do we have any questions for President Stokes before we go to Provost Holloway?
Thank you. This is Dan Stolberg. I put it in the chat. You mentioned about one-time funding from the legislature. As far as I know, I think our pension plan is still underfunded and is concerning to some of the faculty. I wonder if during this time where there is some more funding floating around, whether there would be any ability to ask to help us get to a fully funded pension plan.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. We just had a presentation on, some of those long-term liabilities associated with the university. And I will say that with one-time money available, this is a time to try to get support to fill in those gaps. I also want to acknowledge that the underfunding of our pension has not been something that's been brought to my attention at a level that would lead me to be concerned. I think right now we're focused on the long term. That the liability on the pension fund would be to the extent that it's something that we should be worried about, and I will check with Teresa on it. We really are looking at the long-term sustainability of the entire financial picture for the institution. And that, I mean, there is no doubt how large pension liability would loom. So definitely the time, and I will make sure that we're looking at that.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, President Stokes. The next item on our agenda, I guess, is Provost Holloway's report.
Thank you, Faculty Senate President Coleman. So first, it's very clear that this is the spooky Halloween time and no technology is going to work. My computer died yesterday, so I would normally have a presentation for you, and instead I'm going to talk from notes. And my phone has been acting up too, as Finney well knows. I'd actually like to first invite anyone who wants to come past the provost office on Friday. We're handing out candy and accepting shelf-stable donations for the Lobo Food Pantry. So if you want to come by and see me in a costume, here's your chance. So let me talk a little bit about leadership searches. We have candidates on campus last week and this for the Dean of Law. Our third candidate just got on an airplane, and our fourth candidate is here Thursday and Friday. For those of you who've been attending any of their sessions or forums, please feel free to provide us with feedback through the executive search website. Speaking of websites, by the way, I put a link in the chat to the opportunity to find website for 2040 planning, and a link to the document that President Stokes was talking about with the objectives and goals. Other leadership searches that are really starting now. We've launched the Vice President for Student Affairs search that's chaired by the Search Advisory Committee is chaired by Senior Vice Provost Barbara Rodriguez, and the full committee is up on the executive search website as well. So that one is just launching. We'll have our kickoff meeting of that group, I believe, early next week. We're also putting together the search advisory team for the new chancellor for UNM Valencia. As some of you know from previous reports, Alice Letney, who's been at UNM Valencia for 25 years, 25 remarkable years, is retiring and stepping down next year. So we're launching that search in the next week or so as well. I did want to mention, dovetailing on what President Stokes mentioned about some interest and willingness on the part of the legislature to consider faculty salaries, that we are in the midst of a faculty salary study to look at UNM faculty salaries compared to appropriate peer groups as part of developing the data necessary to really figure out where we need to make those faculty salary investments. We have actually, over the last couple of years, purposefully set aside recurring funds to do faculty equity adjustments to try and slowly inch our way up. But what we've been able to do so far is really small potatoes to what we need. Rough calculations will need something between $10 and $15 million to really get us where we need to be. But that's really the purpose of the study, to make really clear to us what's the recurring funding necessary to get our faculty salaries kind of up to market, if you will. So stay tuned for that as that study becomes available. We'll certainly share what's in that. I want to mention a couple of really focus areas within academics at UNM right now. One is in nursing. There's a significant effort ongoing to increase the number of nursing graduates within the state. It's a huge need. And so our College of Nursing is working very hard to make that expansion possible. And that requires growing their faculty. It requires some additional space. Perhaps one of the hardest challenges is finding clinical placements and preceptors for those placements. Equally, there's a nationwide shortage, not only of nurses, but of nursing faculty. And so the college is working on those issues. We can expect them to bring some curriculum changes through the Faculty Senate processes as well. And so stay tuned for those as those come forward. Another area of emphasis is education, particularly teacher training, teacher preparation. The College of Education and Human Sciences is moving aggressively to address this opportunity for the state. They've launched a professional development program for teachers, in-service teachers to work post-COVID to address some of the challenges that their students will find have developed over the last year or two because of COVID. And so they're working on that professional development in service work. They're also working to grow the teacher education programs as well, including both here in Albuquerque, but also in partnership with branch campuses, our branch campuses, and the associated school districts. And so again, a lot of good work there. In fact, we'll host an education summit here this fall through the College of Education and Human Sciences. So another important area for us to be working on as a university to support the state and to support our students. Finney wanted me to say a little bit about COVID, and so I'll give some brief updates on that. Just kind of some rough numbers on faculty, staff, student vaccinations. Faculty are vaccinated at about 98%, staff 95%, students 92, 93%. There are about 390 current students who we're working with to try and move them through vaccinations. We've had some success there. We've gotten some students who weren't previously reported as vaccinated either to report or to start their vaccination series. And you might notice I said either to report or start vaccinations. We've had students in the last week who were vaccinated back in March, but simply had not reported to us. So as we think about our unvaccinated students, we're really talking about students who we don't know are vaccinated, and it's worth keeping that in mind. Some of them are vaccinated, they just haven't given us their data. One concerning facet of the students who haven't reported is that they tend to be lower income students, students of color, really students who are in vulnerable populations and at risk. And so we're really, our goal is to get them vaccinated, to know they're vaccinated. And the students who we're currently working with are in fact from those vulnerable populations. Let me just to separate out students at the branches, because I know this is of interest to folks. About 82% of the college students at the branches are currently known to be vaccinated, and about 76% of dual and concurrent enrollment students. Both of those numbers have also increased over the last couple of weeks as we have worked with those populations to get them vaccinated. Our other challenge that we're also working on now is new students who are incoming in the spring, new staff who are starting work now or in the next few months, and new faculty who are starting with us in the spring as well. So if you look, for example, at faculty numbers on the dashboard, there are more unvaccinated faculty now than there were 2 or 3 weeks ago. That's because these are newly hired faculty who either aren't vaccinated yet or have not reported their data. So we're working with those new populations as well. Just very briefly, speak about cases on campus. So our caseloads peaked around September 19th or 20th. They've been generally downward since, except in the last few days, in the last week or so, there's been an upswing. We're still at about 60% below that peak back in September. We've seen generally a downward trend. It's too soon to judge what the upswing in the last week really looks like in the long run. But again, it's still well below that peak. All of the, it is an indication that we need to continue good health measures. Remember to mask, remember to practice hand hygiene, get vaccinated, get boosters if you're eligible. And so that we can continue to operate as safely as possible. Wanted to say just a little bit about budget and budgeting. So we're coming into that season as President Stokes alludes in talking about the legislative session and priorities. Just to say where we are kind of right now for this academic year, for this fall. We're projecting that the tuition revenue that comes to the Central Campus Core Fund to be about 6 million short of our target. So instead of about 116 million, it's about 110. And so there is a shortfall in revenue there to address. In planning for the year, we had already left about 3 million unallocated. So that covers about half of that shortfall. The other 3 million of that shortfall, we're simply managing centrally. So we're not pushing out any kinds of mid-year budget rescissions to academic units, but rather managing those shortfalls centrally. That is the key, though, is kind of managing that for the long term. Some of this is driven by enrollment, which is down overall, but the really good news is that all of our new incoming student populations were up in enrollment. New first-year students are up, new transfer students are up, new graduate students are up, sometimes by quite a bit, 10% on new first-year students, almost 20% on new graduate students. And so our influx of students is good. Where we've had challenges, particularly during COVID, is losing students who are stepping out, some because of improved graduations, but some are stepping out because of COVID. But in any event, kind of where we are budgetarily is fine and manageable, not as strong as we would hope. We are currently receiving multi-year planning documents from all of the main campus units, schools, colleges, various other student affairs units, and so on. These are really kind of their plans, where they tell us what they're planning to do, what they hope to do over the next 3 years, what resources are needed to do that. Those will be internally reviewed and presented to the budget leadership team in December or perhaps January. And so that process is ongoing. Also, as President Stokes mentioned, and I've talked with this group before about, we're really developing a 10-year university financial plan that's all funds, the whole university, main campus, HSC, the branch campuses, as well as broken into its subcomponents, so that we can really plan how the choices we make now impact us, potentially impact us in the future, so we can make the right choices now to get where we need to be. That plan or that current modeling will be presented to the budget leadership team in November. So there'll be a first look at that. It's still very much a work in progress, but it's much more refined than it was when we last showed it to the BLT. And then finally, I think many of you know that the College of Arts and Sciences has a structural deficit that they're working on. And so we're working with Arts and Sciences to address a structural deficit of a little over $6 million. And the interim dean, Arash Malfi, has got a good plan in place to try and manage that. And we're supporting him in doing so. And so I'll stop there on those items, but again, remind you that if you want to come by Scholes Hall on Friday, you can pop into the provost's office and get some candy, but also feel free to bring donations for the Lobo Food Pantry. And the president's office has candy as well. So come and indulge your sweet tooth.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Provost Holloway?
I have a question, and it might be too specific, Provost Holloway, and so if so, just let me know and we can have a conversation, I don't know,
Sure.
separately. But I'm in teacher preparation, and you mentioning something about us getting new lines is surprising to me. And so I'm wondering if I don't know where the conversations are, why faculty and teacher preparation programs haven't heard about getting new lines, because in all honesty, we're kind of dying on the vine. So that's great news, but I haven't heard it from my chair. I haven't heard it from my dean. I haven't heard it from anyone in the college itself. So
thanks, Laura, for the question. I described a general set of programs and activities. I did not mention new lines in teacher preparation. I mentioned the statewide need to develop teacher preparation. I know that Dean Burley is preparing a proposal to us around that effort. And so I don't think I mentioned in my comments new lines, but there is a proposal that the dean is preparing around the needs in education and human sciences to address the teacher preparation and in-service teacher development. So we're probably just a little out of sync here.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Finney, I did have a quick question. And I think it probably goes to either President Stokes or to Provost Holloway, but it's concerning salaries in addition to the question of nursing and nursing faculty. And I read a recent report that one of the biggest problems in terms of attracting faculty into nursing programs is that the salaries don't compete with salaries that nurses make or practicing nurses make. And I'm wondering if there's any way to address that.
I will say that is, there's a lot of talk right now legislatively, even with the governor's office, about the nursing shortage and the salaries themselves. That has been one of the major issues. It's not the only one, but it's a major one. There's a desire to expand, the production of nurses, but there's a recognition that, one of the barriers is the ability to grow the faculty and attract them because of the salary issue as a major part of that. So I'm hoping that, this legislative session is going to address that issue. And I think some of those things are one of the reasons why there's a more attention to faculty salaries in general. I think that they're starting, those messages about our ability to meet the needs of the state are starting to resonate across the many areas of higher education. So at least that's my optimistic perspective on that one.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, President Stokes and Provost Holloway. Appreciate your time as always. And look forward to our next meeting. Colleagues, the next item on our agenda is the Faculty Senate President's Report. And Rick, can you pull that down? Thank you. So the first thing that I wanted to mention was the task force that President Stokes talked about. And I hope that we'll all take an opportunity to participate whenever we have chances to participate there. I am arguing for bold, audacious, hairy targets and visions and things like that. It's useful to talk to the provost about where those things kind of would lay in this broader plan. And as I think I'd get struck down by lightning if I didn't mention the value proposition. I'd really like to see the value proposition for the university more fleshed out and available. The next thing is the dean's evaluation process. As you all know, we are responsible for the evaluation process for the deans across campus, both on all of our campuses across the university. And we have not had a very robust return on those forms. It's almost 50 questions. It's very long based on a Likert scale. And I've begun having conversations with the deans to see what might be a better way of going about these evaluations than what we have so far, and taking notes from each of them. And as I, get a better sense of what's, what comes of those conversations, I'd like to invite some of you to come and sit with me to talk through what a good dean's evaluation might look like. We certainly don't have to wait until I'm finished with this process. But before we move forward with anything, of course, we'll bring something back to the Faculty Senate by way of operations and the policy committee to talk about changing that instrument. Right now, the deans just don't see it as being very useful. I don't know if the provost wants to say anything about that, but that instrument is a bit dated.
Finney, do you want me to just very briefly address that?
Please.
Yeah, so I really appreciate Finney's interest in looking at this. I find the dean's evaluations useful. I get them, I look at them, I use the feedback in them to both help coach the deans and to evaluate the deans. We share an anonymized version of that feedback with the deans themselves. And so I think it's a useful thing to have, particularly if we can get nice, good representative samples. The current form that we have is, the number of questions is long, the report that we get is even longer because it's broken out into the responses of sort of rank and file faculty, the responses of chairs, the responses of faculty who self-identify as being heavily involved in faculty governance. Sometimes we're just sort of cutting these down into fairly small numbers. I think we can get good feedback with fewer questions, a simpler instrument that takes less faculty time. I don't think it's too hard to get there. And so, I really appreciate folks doing some thinking about what this feedback system could look like. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. So again, for those of you who have interest in that, please send me an email or reach out to Nancy or Rick, and we'd love to have conversations with you as well about what that process might look like. I also want to return to some of the ideas that some of us will remember talking about before COVID hit. We had a pretty broad slate of ideas and initiatives that we might want to take on as Faculty Senate. A lot of those have been put on the back burner, obviously, because of this pandemic. But one that I would like us to return to, at least thinking about and think about how we might implementing it, is this idea of a caucus system for our Faculty Senate. As it stands right now, we are too large to have meaningful discussions about issues. We wind up coming to these meetings, and I know some of us don't particularly care to simply come and receive information and not have a chance to actually discuss and debate. And one idea was that we might break down into smaller units. And when we have significant issues that need discussion and consideration by the Faculty Senate, we might break down into those smaller groups to have that kind of interaction, discourse that we need. So again, another thing, if you're interested in helping us to think through on an operations committee about how we might make that work, would love your feedback. And again, whatever we would try to do, come back to the Faculty Senate to have a look after operations and policy and other stakeholders have had a chance to look at that. So please put that in your bonnet as well. We have our governance leader retreat mid-semester. We had to postpone it because of my travel, some travel things that came up for me. And so we're going to have that faculty governance leader retreat on the 9th of November. For those of you who don't know about this retreat, we had the retreat during the summer, the leadership retreat with President Stokes, the provost, the chancellor for the health for HSC, and as well as AF&T and COG. We will meet without President Stokes, without Provost Holloway or the regents, to continue the conversations with union leadership, COG, AF&T, and faculty senate. I think it's going to be a fruitful meeting. I had hoped that we would pull that meeting together before this meeting. Really important here is that the leadership from UAUNM also participate in that conversation. So we're really looking forward to coming back together again and replicating the good conversations that we had, or not replicating, building on the good conversations that we had this past summer. The last thing that I have for us today, I'm going to hit send here. All of you should be receiving in your mailbox a copy of the 2022 Faculty Senate Governmental Relations Committee Capital Outlay Request Competition. I'm going to pop this up. I'm going to share screen very quickly. Laura, you're at the top of my screen. Do we have a good doc? Thank you. So here's the document as it sits. All of us will have a chance to have a look at this. I'll give you a second to read through it a little bit here. And we can thank former Faculty Senate President Pamela Pyle for pulling this together. She's very excited about this, has worked hard to pull this together, and really hoping that we can get some good proposals pulled together. The turnaround is pretty short. You can see that November 19th is the deadline. Hoping that you'll take a copy of this, share it out with your departments, share it out with your colleges, so that folk can get this information back to Pamela Pyle, who is now serving as the chair of our Faculty Senate Governmental Relations Committee. And you have her email down there at the bottom. And she also asked you to copy Rick Holmes if you're going to submit something there. Any comments, thoughts on the 2022 Faculty Senate Governmental Relations Committee Capital Outlay Request Competition? Hearing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Let me pop that up over here. All right, colleagues, the next item on our agenda is our consent agenda. This is an action item. This is just one committee appointment, Jim Blankenship to Research Policy Committee. And there are a couple of others that are going to be coming. Thank you, Provost. There will be others that will coming. We still have a couple of vacancies here and there that we need to get filled out. If we have the poll ready, Rick, can you post the poll, please? Colleagues, it appears that consent agenda passes with unanimous consent. The next item on our agenda, one abstention, didn't see that. All right. The next item on our agenda is the Form D for a new PhD in Native American Studies Dr. Tiffany Lee, I believe, is with us to share information about that. Thank you, Tiffany, for joining us.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Everyone can see that all right? Okay. Thank you. It's with really tremendous, fantastic pleasure. I'm here before you today to present our PhD proposal in Native American Studies. It's an exciting time for us, and I want to acknowledge the rest of our faculty and staff who are here, Dr. Lloyd Lee, Dr. Leola Paquin, Dr. Wendy Greyeyes, and Dr. Montoya. So I'm just going to give you a short overview. What I'll be sharing today is a little bit about our program, the purpose of our PhD program, a comparison to other PhD programs across the country in Native American Studies, some of the details and some of the support that we've garnered for our PhD proposal. So Native American Studies is actually one of the oldest programs at UNM. It started in 1970 by student activism. And eventually we were able to offer a BA degree in 2000, awarded our first one in 2005. In 2018, we launched a master's degree and have since graduated over 200 majors and minors and have enrolled 26 MA students since we launched in 2018, and 10 have graduated so far. These are our faculty members, of course, me at the top, and then who I just mentioned, Dr. Lee, Dr. Sinajini Paquin, Dr. Greyeyes, and Dr. Melanie Yazzie. So the purpose of our PhD program is really to build upon our BA and MA, obviously in a more advanced way. So this really, the focus is in three areas. One is critical Indigenous thought, which is our research and theory that inform Native American studies, sustainable community building, and we think about that in broad terms in the many ways that our students, who most of them come from Native communities in New Mexico and elsewhere, how they are working to contribute to their communities. And then a comparative interdisciplinary approach, looking at in Native American studies with focuses on government policy, identity, and sustainability. So we feel that this doctoral program will help to raise the number of researchers who can contribute to the canon of knowledge in Native American studies that specifically does honor our communities in terms of how inclusive and collaborative we try to be with our Native communities. So our vision is that our students who graduate, who become PhD experts, will be leaders not only in academia, but also in policy research and in the abundance of ways that they want to contribute to Native nation building in New Mexico and beyond. So eventually, the primary goal is that they will become advocates for healthy Indigenous communities. So we also really value, in terms of research, expanding their research skills in ways that are ethical, appropriate, and community-based, so that there's a reciprocal relationship, a respectful one, a responsible one, and it's rooted in those kinds of relationship building. So the state of New Mexico, as you know, has 24 pueblos and tribes, and many other Native people who have moved here from other outside the state. And so there is a pressing need here in our state in particular for having PhD level students to work towards those healthier and fully engaged communities. So in comparison, there are actually only 3 other programs in the United States that have a PhD program that is specific to Native American studies, Indigenous studies, or American Indian studies. And those are University of Alaska Fairbanks, University of Arizona, and UC Davis. Of course, you see emphasis in other disciplines, but that are doctoral programs that are specific to a Native American studies department. There's only 3 others. So we would be the 4th in the nation. To give you a brief overview, our degree would require 66 credit hours. 18 of those would be the core courses here that you see listed that tie directly back to those 3 areas I mentioned before. And then they would also have a another specific research methods course that they could take through our department or through another department. So we really are trying to utilize the courses that already exist at UNM and not, we only are proposing 2 new courses, well, 3 new courses, along with the dissertation course at the end of their program. You just have the typical entrance requirements, the GPA, letters of recommendation, their statement, and so forth, as you see here. We have gathered a lot of community support for the PhD program. We've been doing this for quite a while. We submitted the proposal right before the pandemic hit, so that really slowed things down. But before that, we had been doing surveys and petitions, and at one conference, we were American Indian Studies Association conference that was here at UNM. Dr. Greyeyes had coordinated this survey, and where 110 students, faculty, and community members showed great support for the doctoral program. That's the numbers you see in green or depicted in green, the bar graph there. And then we also had a petition of nearly 438 signatures. We've also gained a lot of tribal and university support. We have a resolution from the El Pueblo Council of Governors, letters of support from the Navajo Nation and the Mescalero Apache, 20 letters of support from departments and entities at UNM, and then lots of other letters from other New Mexico and educational entities here in New Mexico and across other states. So that's really it. Thank you. And I'll stand for any questions. And I also ask, my colleagues to join in helping me answer questions if needed.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. For one, I just want to offer kudos to you and all of the faculty and staff in Native American Studies who've worked so hard to pull this proposal together. I know it's been a long time coming. I have to say I'm kind of competitive, and having spoken with colleagues at the University of Arizona and about the demand for the PhD and how they are able to siphon off our students to go over to Arizona, or people from the Pueblos here to go there for the PhD. This is a long time coming. Congratulations on the hard work that you've put together. Chris Elder.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for your presentation. I'm really excited about the possibility. I just really had a question. I'm a professor in the English department, specifically professional writing. And just because of my work with Indigenous graduate students in that program, and because we're rethinking our own language requirements for the MA and the PhD, I was curious as to what language requirements there might be for the PhD in Native American Studies.
Yeah, we talked about that extensively. We don't have a language requirement. And one of the major reasons is, we're thinking a lot of our students will come from our MA program, or they will be, a large number of them will be Native American from, the community here or across the country. And, being Native American myself, I would want to take a language that is specific to my community if I'm not fluent in it already. And there wouldn't be equal access to that. So, for example, at UNM, students can take Navajo language, but Pueblo students can't necessarily take their language here, and the Pueblos probably would not support that either. And then the burden would be on them to really find an equivalent to go to their community or some other way to fulfill a language requirement. So that's why we decided not to require that.
Can I just ask one follow-up? Is it relatively new that Navajo is taught at UNM, or is it just to a certain undergraduate level? The reason why I ask is because one of my grad students, part of the problem with our language requirements is that, for example, if you're Native, you have to somehow prove that you speak your native language to a certain level, and which I think means our language requirement is prejudicial because it assumes English as the default. And this student had difficulty finding someone to give her a test that was high enough because she's so proficient. That's part of where my question comes from.
So Navajo is actually a very old program here. It's been here for quite a while, but it's only up to a minor degree. So
Yeah.
they have a small number of students, and but it's a strong program and growing.
Thank you.
Hi, can I jump in? Dr. Lee, first, I just want to thank you so much. I think this is a fantastic initiative. I'm just curious for a little bit of clarification. It seems like the program would be very interdisciplinary. And my own degree, my own PhD is interdisciplinary, which put up a lot of roadblocks in terms of career placement afterwards. So I'm wondering if you could sort of address the long-term approaches, people who get PhDs in Native American studies, what kind of career options are there outside of academia, especially if there are only 4 universities, UNM included, with programs that would be hiring presumably?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you asked it because, we are actually one of the few departments at UNM who is able to hire a new faculty member. And we are competing with, I kid you not, probably 15 other universities who are now advertising for assistant professors in Indigenous studies. They may not be specific to a Native American Studies department, but they're, an affiliated program or with other departments. So there is, I think, a strong growing presence of Native American and Indigenous studies and American Indian studies across the country. In terms of other areas, our communities have treaty-based relationships with the federal government, and often growing relationships with the state. So I think there's a lot of work in terms of that sort of policy research to be done. And then also just building that human resource capacity amongst our communities who have PhD level expertise in research and writing and grant writing. And then they can start, I think a lot of them can start their own institutes. Many have done that to do community advocacy work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the information.
Yeah. Any other questions? Carolyn Scraggs?
Hi, yeah, thanks for your presentation. I'm wondering about how many PhD students do you anticipate having at any one time, or how many graduates per year do you anticipate?
Well, that is dependent on the number of faculty that we can, I think we're planning, because we will have one additional, our new assistant professor is actually replacing one who is leaving, so we'll be at 5. So we're thinking probably of starting fairly small, but I think eventually growing to as many as 10. Is that right, Lloyd? We're in the proposal, we're thinking about like 10 a year, if that's ideal. If we have full capacity of faculty in our department of around 8, if we can get 8 faculty.
Yeah, I think we anticipate down the line that at some point we would get to that number. Like Dr. Lee mentioned, it's really our faculty capacity right now. We can't start at that number just because we just only have 5 faculty at the moment. But I think the projection is to get to that point where we have at least 10 PhD students.
And it's helpful that we have a lot of our courses are drawn from other departments. So we, are really making use, like I said, of Indigenous studies that is being and related courses across the university. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Hearing none. Colleagues, this is an action item for Form D, new PhD in Native American Studies. We could have our poll. Okay. Colleagues, that Form D passes with overwhelming support. Dr. Lee, thank you so much. And the rest of of your faculty for this Form D. Good luck with it moving forward.
Thank you so much. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Problem. Colleagues, the next item on our agenda is another Form D for a new post-professional doctoral degree in occupational therapy. And I believe the good Dr. Poole, I thought I saw his shoe.
I'm here.
There she is. Hi,
I'm
Janet.
here.
Is here to give us a report on that.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm trying to share my screen now. So I think I did that. Okay, so this is for a doctoral degree, a different type of doctoral degree, post-professional practice degree, doctoral degree in occupational therapy. And I'm Janet Poole, and I am the program director of the occupational therapy graduate program. So I just wanted to mention what is occupational therapy. So occupational therapists help people of all ages with a wide variety of health conditions or disabilities to engage successfully in occupations, which are personally meaningful activities, and then to participate as fully as possible in daily life activities, routines, and roles. So right now, we are an we have an entry-level master's degree in occupational therapy. It's a 2.5-year program, which will be continued. There's a little confusion sometimes because there's two ways into the profession. There's also an entry-level doctoral degree, also called an OTD. And I put this in there. I'm hoping that it's not confusing. I'm putting in because I'm hoping it's going to clarify things. But with these entry-level programs, graduates of those can sit for the National Board of Certification to become occupational therapist exams, and then they can become occupational therapists registered. So again, we have the entry-level MOT degree, and we are planning to continue that. So the proposed post-professional, and I meant to put practice degree, is for occupational therapists who already have a degree in occupational therapy. So they are already occupational therapists, and it may include experienced occupational therapy practitioners, as well as any recent graduates from our MOT program or other MOT programs in the country. So the decision to offer professional practice doctoral degree is market driven. There are no occupational therapy doctoral degree programs currently in New Mexico. And UNM and the state of New Mexico are losing occupational therapists who are enrolling in universities outside the state to obtain these post-professional doctoral degrees. They're having to pay out-of-state tuition, which is an increased cost to them. And oftentimes they do not come back to the state. And the need and interest for an OTD degree has been expressed by students in our program and occupational therapists in New Mexico for the past decade. And we conducted a survey recently of about 232 occupational therapists in New Mexico who did not have doctoral degrees, and about 40% of them were interested, but 98% of our current students were very interested in obtaining this type of degree. The other thing that has kind of driven this discussion with us and shows the need for the program is there are ongoing discussions in the profession itself. So in August of 2017, the Accreditation Council on Occupational Therapy Education mandated that the entry-level requirement for the occupational therapist would move to a doctoral level. And then in August of 2018, they put this educational mandate in abeyance to have further discussion. People were concerned about really the shortage of faculty available to teach in these programs, among other things. And then in April of 2019, the Representative Assembly, which is our governing body of the American Occupational Therapy Association voted to support dual entry degree for OTs. So like I showed in that previous slide, people could enter with an entry-level master's degree or an entry-level doctoral degree. And this move to a doctoral degree is still under discussion and at some time probably will happen. So we want to be prepared and have trained faculty and therapists in the state to be ready in case that does happen. So nationwide and in New Mexico, there's a shortage of occupational therapy with therapists, faculty, and also just practitioners with doctoral degrees. And those people are needed to educate the future occupational therapists, but also to assume leadership roles in practice, advocacy, public policy, and clinical practice, and then also to improve service delivery. And we are ready to develop that pathway for OT practitioners to enter our OTD program, with hoping that the graduates will be available and interested in educating the next generation. We hope by having this OTD degree, we'll retain New Mexico occupational therapy practitioners who desire a post-professional doctoral degree because they'll be able to get the degree here in New Mexico and at less cost than out-of-state programs. And there are many of the surrounding states have these OT degrees. We are losing our graduates already who have gone to Texas Tech, Texas Women's University, Rocky Mountain University, believe Colorado State, and the University of Utah will be offering these types of degrees, but then our residents of New Mexico have to pay out-of-state tuition. This slide shows our curriculum. The curriculum is 30 credits. 6 of those are elective. So a student, if they are interested in taking classes, let's say from on public policy or special education or somewhere else, they would be able to do that if they have the prerequisite courses or find another specialty area. We also have a professional capstone project in which students can develop a project and sort of like a marketing project to develop a new type of occupational therapy service. And the program is basically online. However, we are requesting people come to campus about 1 to 2 days per year. At that point, they can do like presentations and things like that in person. What we found is sometimes people that are in these doctoral degrees online really have actually little to no experience. This is in occupational therapy, little to no experience actually doing like presentations and face-to-face presentations. The number of credits is very similar to other post-professional doctoral degree programs that usually range around 30, 32. There's about 1 or 2 that are 36 credits. The projected enrollment is 5 students the first year. We do predict that the majority of our students are going to want to continue to be working and will probably be part-time. And then by the 3rd year, we hope to have 13. Like I said, full and part-time options are available. It's online primarily. The budget of our program is adequate to support the expenses of developing the OTD program, as the enrollment revenue from our existing entry-level MOT program will support these. And then by the 3rd year, our program should be self-sufficient. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions, colleagues? Here, none. Colleagues, this is an action item on Form D, the new post-professional doctoral degree in occupational therapy, OTD. Can we post the poll, please? Colleagues, that Form D passes with overwhelming support. Thank you, Janet, for your hard work on this and everyone else associated with this. Good luck with this moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. It was great to see everybody.
Okay. Colleagues, the next item on our agenda is an action item. We've had discussion about faculty handbook policy CO7. You've had a chance to review the document. We've made certain changes, clerical and the like. So this is not a discussion item, it's a voting item. Please post a poll. Colleagues, the measure passes 84% voting in favor for that. This will be forwarded to the Student Success Teaching and Research Committee of the Regents and on the 2nd of December, and then to the full Regents on the 7th of December. Thank you for your consideration of that one. Colleagues, the final item on our agenda, we don't have anyone signed up for public comment, right?
No.
Nancy? Okay. The final item on our agenda is an information item. David Pitcher, Dr. Pitcher is going to give us a COVID-19 update. And I wonder, colleagues, I've had a number of students, and I probably should have asked this when the provost was here, and maybe I'm just being gamed by my students, but my students, I'm surprised at the number of students who are reporting to me that their roommates are COVID positive. I've been fortunate that only one of my students has been has contracted COVID and is coming through it. Does anyone else see an uptick in the number of, other people are saying the same kind of thing? No? Carla, I wonder, it could be, I hate to, this is the time of the year when you get a lot of, grandmothers die, and it's that season. I've had some poor kids have had the same grandmother die twice the same semester. It's an interesting uptick, and I maybe Dr. Pitcher can give us some insight.
I think I can, and good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Coleman. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here on behalf of Dr. Richards, who is otherwise engaged this afternoon, but COVID is what I've been living and breathing for the last close to year and a half, 2 years now. So I'm well versed on the issues and hopefully can answer some of your questions as well. What I'd like to do is share my screen and just go through a brief update in terms of the status of COVID within our state and within UNM. And then I'll open it up for questions with everybody. So. Okay, are you all able to see my screen? All right. So I'm just going to go through some high-level epidemiological slides just to make a few points. So this slide is showing essentially the number of daily cases that have shown up in New Mexico since the beginning of the pandemic back in March of 2020 when we saw our first cases here. And what you'll immediately see is the big surge that we saw last fall that began about this time of year and lasted through early March when we dropped back down to a relatively low number of new cases per day. This is also when vaccinations were really starting to take hold and a lot of us were feeling a lot of hope and optimism. But then what you see now is another surge that's essentially in this plateaued kind of state that began probably in early to mid February or July. And that actually represents the emergence of the Delta variant, which is a little easier to transmit and a little more infectious, if you will, and perhaps has a little more morbidity associated with it. And so we're now in this second larger surge, but unlike previous surges where you see a fairly quick peak and then the numbers start to drop off, what we're seeing now is we're just stuck in this plateaued flat state with the same number of new daily cases on average for at least the last 4 weeks now. So modeling data from Los Alamos and from the Presbyterian system suggests that we're going to stay in this plateaued state probably up through late December and into early January before they're predicting that the numbers will actually start coming down again. And that's disconcerting because we were all hoping to see a lot of this behind us. And it just doesn't seem to be happening quick enough. If you look at what's happening with our emergency departments, the emergency department visits, which are in the blue, the darker blue, you see that we saw a big surge back last year about this time. And then we've seen another surge associated with the Delta variant. But those numbers are actually coming down. We're actually seeing fewer and fewer patients present to emergency departments across the state. While at the same time, if you look at the turquoise line, we are now starting to see our entry into flu season. And that has significance for all of us because, at least in healthcare, because you know, it's sort of a double whammy trying to take care of COVID patients and take care of really sick flu patients at the same time. So we're hopeful that the numbers for COVID are going to continue to come down, and they're going to come down in time so that we have some ability to care for what is an expected and typical upsurge in flu cases during the early winter months. If you look at the impact of COVID on hospitalization statewide, if you look at just the red graph here, what you see are that hospitalizations are also in a relatively flat or plateaued state now. They're nowhere near where they were during our first big surge a year ago. but they've remained in the same range now for at least the last 4 weeks. And that's consistent with the new daily cases remaining in the same flat state as well. We don't expect the hospitalizations or the pressure on the healthcare delivery system in our state to start coming down until, again, early January, perhaps, when we'll start to see this really taper off. This graph is kind of busy, but its real purpose is just to show that over time, we're being hit by different variants of the COVID virus. And if you look early on, the lineage was not really well defined, but it was in starting again early summer when we started to see the emergence of the Delta variant, which now makes up virtually all of the cases that we're seeing. And we believe that it's the behavior of this Delta variant that's leading to this unusual plateaued state that we're in. It's really just hanging on in our community. I wanted to make a point about vaccination with this slide. Vaccination is highly effective at reducing the incidence of daily cases. It's also very effective at reducing the risk of hospitalization and the risk of death from COVID, but it's not perfect. So in the last 6 months, we still are seeing cases of COVID among those who are fully vaccinated. And we're still seeing hospitalizations, although not as many. And we're also seeing deaths among those who are vaccinated as well. So the message is vaccination is important. It provides a high degree of protection, but it's not perfect. But for those that remain unvaccinated, your risk of contracting the illness, the risk of hospitalization, and the risk of death is significantly higher in that population. So I want to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID on the UNM healthcare delivery system, which really is primarily UNM Hospital and Sandoval Regional Medical Center. So UNM Hospital has been running at well over 100% occupancy, meaning we have more patients in our hospital than we have licensed beds. And we've been doing that for over a year now, beginning with that first major surge of COVID that we saw back in October. But even now, as the COVID census is coming down, what we're seeing is that there, for the better part of a year, patients delayed coming in for routine care or for minor symptoms or minor illnesses. And so now we're seeing patients inundate our emergency rooms and our hospitals with more serious illness that is the result of delayed or neglected care that occurred over the prior year. And that's what's now actually driving our high census status. Excuse me. Right now, as of today, the COVID positive census within our health system, the numbers today are 47 COVID positive patients between UNM Hospital and SRMC. And that represents less than 10% of our overall patient census. So 90% of the care that we're delivering right now is for non-COVID related illness. And we're being crushed by the demand. Our occupancy at UNM Hospital is running between 130 and 150% on a daily basis. That's not sustainable. That takes added resources, more nurses, more techs, more doctors, takes money, it takes all sorts of things. But it's starting to really take its toll on all of our staff. There's just no end in sight, and it's sort of like drinking from a fire hose. Another problem that we have is that rural hospitals are really struggling to keep staff or to maintain services. So more patients that would normally go to some of our more rural facilities for care are ending up with us at UNM or with Presbyterian or with Lovelace or Christus St. Vincent. But that's putting an additional burden on already strained delivery system resources. So, this is all starting to take its toll. And what we're really starting to see now is that we really can't manage the high-end transfers that would normally come to us. UNM has a unique role in the state in that we provide a lot of the services that aren't available anywhere else within the state. And I would use our trauma services as an example, neurosurgical care, cancer care, things that you just can't get, for example, at a Gallup Indian Medical Center or at a small hospital in Roswell, for example. So what that's doing is it's really limiting access to needed care for many patients throughout New Mexico. But because we're so busy, so full, and there's been no real respite, we're having to start to deal with significant burnout and wellness concerns among all of our faculty, staff, residents, and students. And we're starting to have to plan ahead for what we would consider to be mass migration or mass retirements and other things. We're going to start to see real workforce issues even within UNM in the coming months. So, overall, we are truly in a tough spot. We're still holding our own. We're still delivering services as best we can. But, we're a health system that's can't take too many more body blows over the next year or two. We're hopeful that we will see this current surge start to drop off. We're hopeful that we will be able to catch up on some of the delayed care and we'll start to see demand start to drop. And we're hopeful that rural hospitals may start to enter a recovery phase where they can re-recruit and reestablish some critical services out in our outlying communities. So with that uplifting note, I'll open it up for questions.
Ian and Carla, I see you. Thank you for that, Dr. Pitcher. We'll go ahead, Ian, and then Carla, and then if we have any other questions after that.
Okay, thank you, Finney. Dr. Pitcher, thank you so much. I really appreciate your report. I actually have a question of information and a question for advice. I've encountered a number of people that continue to labor under false information about the vaccinations. And given the numbers you're showing about the efficacy of the actual vaccination, I'm wondering if you have advice on how do you deal with somebody who believes that the vaccinations are going to cause sterility or are embedding tracking devices or whatever other conspiracy ideas are being put out there.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I get those questions too. What I try and do, and of course I've got the aura of the white coat behind me, I can speak as a physician. And what I try and tell folks is that, there's a lot of information out there and you got to be careful what information you're listening to. And I'm also frank with folks that the messaging around COVID and the science around COVID has been politicized, and that's horribly unfortunate. And I advise people, don't get your advice from a political party or from a political point of view. You really need to independently look at what the data tells us. And what the data tells us is generally the vaccines are incredibly safe. They're as safe as other vaccines. There is no vaccine that is perfectly safe. they all come with a low risk of certain well-defined complications that may occur. But this vaccine is safe. No vaccine is perfect. It will not prevent illness in all people. But a good vaccine prevents illness in the majority of people that receive that vaccine. And a good vaccine, if it doesn't prevent illness, also reduces severity. And that's exactly what we see with this vaccine, is that it works. And, you know, the hospitalization data is a classic example. You know, people who've been vaccinated, they're not the ones taking up hospital beds. There's a few, but most of those who are getting sick and requiring hospitalization, and most of those who die, are unvaccinated. And just from a practical standpoint, what group do you want to be in? You know, do you want to take your chances or not? But that's generally how I advise people. And I try not to get too preachy, and I try not to sway into a defensive argument over the science or get sucked into a political argument.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for your time today.
Carla?
Dr. Pitcher, this is Carla Wilhite. I'm the currently the chair of the Health Sciences Faculty Senate Council, and the executive committee of the Health Sciences Faculty Council met with Dr. Ziodonis and with Dr. Mike Richards about a month ago to discuss the faculty burnout and also their clinical colleagues in nursing and so forth, all faculty and students that are working within the system and overburdened. And, you know, right now the resources of the HSC have been mostly directed towards reactive types of solutions to the burnout issue, meaning that it's incumbent on the person that's overworked and distressed to be able to reach out and get an appointment sometime down the road to address their mental health and wellness concerns, you know, regarding the burden that they're carrying from the COVID pandemic. And we made a suggestion to Dr. Richards and Dr. Ziodonis that new and robust and cutting edge, perhaps even no solution off the table in terms of getting mental health and wellness resources at the point of distress. It's done in the military. The military embeds mental health professionals within the different teams of the military, and mental health is actually just part of the team. And I think that that is something that we should try with our workforce, is to embed as many mental health and wellness professionals as we can within the teams, to be there after, you know, patients expire. And the only person that they have had to hold their hand is a nurse, a resident, a physician. And since Mike and Dr. Ziodonis aren't here, I hope that you will take this back to them, and also hope that any other colleagues from the HSC who are here today would also speak to remedies.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Will. I absolutely agree with you, and I will tell you that your message to Dr. Z and Dr. Richards last month actually resonated and has been an active point of discussion at the HSC incident management team and at our joint emergency operations center meetings for the delivery system. So we're under active discussion, talking with Dr. Towen, who's chair of behavioral health and psychiatry, talking to other mental health professionals, talking to our wellness folks, and we're coming up with that more proactive approach. Now, this is not easy. Nobody really knows how to, to do this on the fly, particularly when those that we're asking to provide the resources and help are themselves caught up in a lot of this moral anguish over the impact that COVID is having on us in health care in particular. But just as an example, Dr. Richards announced, I think it was yesterday, and put it out today, he's going to start a series of town halls specifically focused on more proactively getting with various faculty and others to discuss wellness issues. There's an increased focus on getting to departmentally based faculty meetings and having direct conversations. And there are other ideas being bantied about in terms of how we could do so. But your comments and your perspective are spot on. We do need to look at this in a more proactive way rather than a sort of reactive way. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Heather?
Well, this is a quick question. So there's a certain percentage of students, shall we say, who are fabricating their vaccination cards and uploading those. And so my question for you is, when you have this vaccination information, are you taking these cards at face value, or is there a more accurate database somewhere of who's actually really truly vaccinated?
Yeah, this is a tough one. We tend to, at least currently, believe in the goodwill of 98% of the people we work with. And, it is tough to apply resources to track down the accuracy of some of these things. So at least I know on the Health Sciences Center side of things, we have a little tighter control over determining who was vaccinated because we vaccinated most of them. But we do have to trust and rely on when people, present their vaccination card to us, and they may have been vaccinated outside. We have to trust that that's the case. We just don't have the resources to go in and independently verify.
Thank you so much, because there is a cottage industry that's sprung up of fabricated vaccination cards. Okay, so hopefully that's not a surprise to anybody here. Just as enough.
Larissa?
Hi, thank you for joining us today, Dr. Pitcher. I have a question. I've been hearing a combination of the difficulty we've had in nursing support of our clinic staff, and also at the same time, the current nursing that we do have being poached by Lovelace and the other hospitals in the area. And I wondered, is there any kind of system level or state level attempts at mitigating that poaching behavior? Because a lot of the junior faculty I mentor are burned out because they're doing their own work plus the work of the nurses that are now gone because they've been given signing bonuses and raises at other hospitals.
Yeah, right. I don't think there are any state level mitigation efforts, but we are well aware within the health system. And so just as a point of reference, in the last month, we spent well north of $7 million for contract nursing labor. That labor is getting incredibly expensive. It's also started essentially a bidding war, and this happens often in nursing between health systems locally and regionally, where it doesn't take much in terms of a wage increase to poach or lure somebody away. And it's even easier when your nursing staff are overworked and burned out and fried and everything else. Doesn't take much to think the grass is going to be greener elsewhere. We are trying to do things like keeping up financially. That's not sustainable long term, but we're trying to find ways to innovatively do that. And we're also trying ways to work around just the hourly wage component of the discussion and really focus more on things like guaranteed staffing ratios and other things that will reassure nursing staff that if they remain here or come here, they're going to be better off than they may be if they go somewhere else for a little higher wage, but more difficult working circumstances. So that's what we're trying to do now. But I don't see any coordinated state level efforts on this.
Thank you. So that $7 million is $7 million per month, from what I understand. That's
Yes,
not
sir.
like that's a lot of money.
Yes.
And you know, I wonder if this isn't just an opportunity to start paying our nurses a better wage. It just, the market is demanding it, and we're just failing to meet the market's demand, even though we have the resources to meet some of that demand, which I don't understand. I had one kind of drill down question for you, and then I think we'll let you go, Dr. Pitcher. You, on the one slide, you talked about there's that 6% of people who are vaccinated, 6.5%, I think, who still wind up passing away from this disease. And I wonder if we've broken out that 6% in terms of pre-existing conditions or other contributing factors, or is it directly related to COVID?
Yeah, that data has been broken out. So those that are fully vaccinated that are still succumbing to COVID do tend to be elderly with multiple comorbid conditions. And it's postulated that in that setting, the vaccine is just less effective, or that the immune response to the vaccine did not provide the same degree of immunity that it might in somebody without those comorbidities. So it's still the vulnerable populations, even if they've been vaccinated, who are at higher risk of death.
Thank you. Any last questions for Dr. Pitcher? Hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Pitcher. Appreciate your time. Hopefully we can have you back again. That was very informative. Colleagues, our agenda is exhausted. We are adjourned.